It was Babe Ruth was probably one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Certainly, for years and years and years, nobody could come close to his 714 home runs until Hank Aaron did it a couple of decades ago. And everybody thought the world of Babe Ruth because of just what he did for baseball. I mean, he was just so well known. But later on in his career, he hung on too late. He was traded. He was with the Cincinnati Braves at this point, and his career was just going more and more downhill. Stayed in the game too long. In one game, as a matter of fact, he just struck out in the beginning of that inning and then made a number of errors that actually cost the Braves 5 runs. Now, his loyal fan base for years had cheered for the Sultan of Swat, were now just kind of booing and jeering. As a matter of fact, they were actually shaking their fists at him as he walked off the field. Babe Ruth was looking pretty down, feeling pretty much like a failure at that point, when jumping out of the stands came a little boy, ran running across the field, tears streaming down his face, and wrapped his arms around Babe Ruth's legs and hugged him. Babe Ruth looked down and patted him on the head, and then hand on his shoulder, that boy and Babe Ruth walked off the field together as everybody in the world just felt the change of tension. Because you know what? That little boy got it. Little kids know the importance of not doing life alone, the importance of friendships. It was Jackie Robinson was the first black athlete to play baseball in America, and Jackie Robinson was getting harassed everywhere he went. I mean, he was breaking down racial tensions in this nation, and wherever he went, he was getting booed. He was actually in his home stadium in Brooklyn one day when he made an error, and the fans, just were merciless. It was just terrible, both verbally and just obviously with the boos, but it was just deafening. He was actually standing on the base, second base, after having made the error, just looking down and dejected, when all of a sudden he noticed a short white guy from the South named Pee Wee Reese, a shortstop, who came walking over and had put his arm around Jackie Robinson. And he looked up at the crowd with his arm around Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Robinson looked up as well, and together they stared at the crowd until they stopped. Jackie Robinson will say, that moment in my life changed my career. He said, I'm not even sure I would have made it without what Pee Wee Reese did that day in my life. There was a moment in the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin. Adolf Hitler was now in power. The Aryan race was being exalted. And there was a long jumper, a runner, an amazing guy that you all know as Jesse Owens, who had just cleared 26 feet, 8 inches and a quarter to set a new world record just before the games. That world record was so great at that time, it literally would stand for 25 years, which is pretty unheard of for a world record. Black guy in an Olympic event in Berlin where the Aryan race was supposed to be shown for all that it was. It was very apparent that Jesse Owens was nervous before his trial run at the long jump, when a big, blonde hair, strong-looking tall man from the German team walked up and over to him. His name was Luz Long. They talked for a while, and finally Luz said, hey man, you can clear 26 feet easily. So listen, all you have to do to make qualification is to clear 23 feet. Why don't you set your jumping point back a little bit? It'll just make it easier for you. Then you can relax and then do what you do. Now, Luz Long was able to clear 26 feet too. Not 26 feet 8, but he was an amazing athlete. And everybody from the German world of athletes were counting on him. Jesse Owens smiled in appreciation and did exactly what Luz said, qualified easily, and then they went on to jump together. Jesse Owens actually set an Olympic record that day. And in fact, the Olympic record that he set, Luz Long was behind him, took in second. It was one of 4 gold medals. It was, I think, the second one that Jesse Owens received. There standing after the final jump was Jesse Owens, and Luz Long, first guy out there, came, shook his hand, and looked straight up at Adolf Hitler. And together they just kind of made all the difference. And Jesse Owens said of that moment, here's a quote of what he said. Owens, again, will never see Long. He was killed in the Second World War, but he said, you could melt down all the medals and cups I have, and they wouldn't be a plating on the 24-karat friendship I felt for Luz Long. What an amazing moment. You know what it's like to have a friend walk into your world that way? And there was a Peanuts cartoon by Charles Schulz. And if you know anything about Peanuts, it's about a guy by the name of Charlie Brown, his dog Snoopy, Lucy. Well, there was this unique girl that he developed over the years called Peppermint Patty, kind of a rough and tumble, tomboyish kind of girl. And she had this buddy, this friend with glasses named Marcia. Wherever Peppermint Patty went, Marcia would go with her. One day, Peppermint Patty was talking to Marcia, and she said this. You know, Marcia, I'd like to read this book, but I'm kind of afraid. I had a grandfather who didn't think much of reading. And then she said, he always said that if you read too many books, your head would fall off. Marcia said, sir, you start the first chapter, and I'll hold on to your head. What an amazing friend, huh? You ever had a moment in your life when you just needed somebody to hold on to your head? You know enough now about my story to know that there was a time in our life when we discovered that our third son had brain cancer. I remember the day very distinctly. It was the 1st of April, and it was a bad April Fool's joke. And the tumor was huge. The extent of it and the danger of it we hadn't yet determined, but I remember the warrior in me pulled out my sword. I was ready to fight for my son. We will fight then for days, onto weeks, into months. And in that moment, the king in me was pretty high. The lover in me was very, very strong. I was about to lose my son. The warrior in me, I felt like I was ready to slash almost anything. And a lot of what we had been built into us until that point was doing very, very well. But apart from Lynn and my 3 sons plus a son who had cancer, there were 4 men who, when they saw the sword begin to droop, and when they saw that my strength was running out, they stood by me. Those 4 men, named Roy Smith and Steve Sable, a guy by the name of Claire Hoover, and a good friend, Phil. When Phil and Garber and the rest of the guys entered my life, they entered my life having been very real friends and very important friends for a long time period. But at this time, they realized that I was going to have trouble holding on to this sword. You know what they did? They said, it's okay. You can lay it down. I know you're battle weary. We got you covered. You know that Roy texted me, amen, 26 times in one day? It meant that 26 times he had prayed for me and Caleb and our family. Some of those texts came in at 2 in the morning and 4 in the morning. It was the second surgery for Caleb that we hadn't got the tumor out at the first one, and we found out that it was a deadly cancer and that he would have less than a year unless they could get rid of the tumor. And so it was Steve Sable at the second surgery that arrived at the hospital before Caleb and I arrived at the hospital. 5 a.m. in the morning. We were staying at the Ronald McDonald House when I get a phone call from Steve, and he goes, hey, dude, where are you guys? I got you covered. Do you have any idea what that moment feels like? To have a guy there at the battle zone where we actually have great news by the end of the day. It was the end of that day that Phil Garber and his wife Cindy met Lynn and I, took us out, just get us out of the hospital, took us out for dinner, and actually what we thought was going to be kind of a difficult dinner because they didn't know when they came. It was a celebration because the tumor was out and the prognosis suddenly became much better. It was Claire Hoover who said, if we need radiation, we will make sure that Caleb's room is clean. So he brought a team of guys, and they repainted his whole room and took care of his bathroom and just kind of redid the whole hallway. Everything that would be anywhere where Caleb might, if he had to have chemotherapy, might come under affection would be involved. I don't know if they knew that they picked up my sword. I don't know if they knew exactly all that they were doing in my life, but they carried me during that time period, along with my amazing sons, my amazing wife, an amazing God who cared for me on levels that you just can't even imagine, and countless other friends at a variety of levels. Those 4 guys can have anything they want. They went to battle with me at one of my deepest times. So when you're battle weary and your sword's laid down and your chainmail feels like it's tattered, you're going to need to understand what we call the loyalty formula. Join with me as we look together. This whole idea of this loyalty formula is this idea where there are so many friendships that are significant to a night. Why are they so significant for you and I as a night. Why do we need to have friendships? Well, there's a reason. There's a formula actually we're going to look at. You're not meant to do life alone. Remember we said that week one. Guys, we don't do life alone. We're not designed to do it alone. That if you try to go it alone, you leave yourself vulnerable. Now, I know everything about our culture shows guys like Rambo who can handle things alone. It's always about one guy being the tough guy, but we're not wired that way. We're actually meant to do things in units. Male friendship is one of the most important things, and that's what we want to talk about when we talk about the loyalty formula. All right, why are friendships so significant to the night? A, the forest is more dangerous if you are alone. You know what? God declared in the very beginning when he created man, it's not good that they be alone. Why? Well, there's an enemy. Now, in many respects, it was so that we would learn to protect the heart of a woman, which is where the enemy went after the very beginning. But the reality is that the declaration it's not good for us to be alone is carried out now. That you're going to need guys to stand alone because this is a very dangerous world we live in. The forest is not excited to have nights in it. The culture in which we live literally fights against you. It's one of the three things that fight against us. Your own body fights against you, that shadow we talk about. Your own being fights, the world, the force fights against you, and actually an enemy named Satan. All of those converge. It's not good that you be alone. Look at B. To succeed at most tasks in life, a team is required. Josh, my oldest son, during this time period with Caleb, he was calling all the time. He actually took over. I let him care for the family. And Joel did certain things. Seth was the glue. Each of the guys stepped up. You need a team. Now, I had sons, but I also had these four men who were like just basically knights on white horses for me, who didn't let me go through a moment of the journey. As a matter of fact, they, to this day, are still the guys I go to with any concern, any problem. In fact, Steve Sable calls himself my armor bearer. You know what an honor that is? He's saying, dude, I'm here for you. My greatest joy is to carry your shield, carry your sword. And if you knew the impact of this guy's life and how many lives he touches, I'm honored every time he says it. It's one of the joys that we have in being a team together. All right, look at C. Living alone is not conducive to personal growth. Instead, it allows for self-distortions. Did you ever wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and believe lies that you wouldn't normally believe? You know how we talked about fear? And how that sometimes it's just never really going to happen, but in the middle of the night it feels that way? The distortion of the lies is when we kind of feel like we're just done with the battle. We feel so weakened and we get beat up on. I one of those guys I'm talking about is going through a tricky time in his life right now, and he's been battling in the middle of the night almost every night. So what are the guys doing as part of that group? They're sending him emails, telling him they're praying. We're doing all kinds of things. I'm calling him almost every morning, seeing how he's doing, how he's focusing. Because what happens is in the middle of the night, we hear and believe lies. It's not conducive for us to do it alone. So if we understand that, then just right now resolve, I'm going to find a couple key guys in my life. Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you right now to start thinking about those guys. I want you to start thinking of some names of guys that are key, not in the past, but now. All of us have some guys in the past. Sometimes it's easier for you to get started that way. Who was your best friend when you were 5 or 10, 15? Who was best man in your wedding? Or who was the guy that was your college roommate? You can put some names together. That puts that sequence. And if you're in college, you got it right there. It's your college roommate. If you just got married last week, there's the guy. Okay, you got some names, right? Start to put names in there to understand when we have this loyalty formula in our lives, it connects with certain guys. But I'm going to give you some permission to understand some things about the loyalty formula. So let's go over it and take a look at what that is in our books. We need to understand what is a friendship. What is the friendship formula? What is it that we're going to put together to make this loyalty thing work? Here's a definition. A mutual striving in tasks, conversations, time commitments, interests, and interpersonal connection that leads you to a friendship bond. One of the most amazing things that kind of started doing what we're doing with you, and again, I can't tell you how honored it is for you and I to do this together. Every time I have the chance just to be with you, I'm so honored that we get to talk and think things through because I know what an impact it has made in my life and what it's going to make in yours. What changed for me was men doing life together. That's really what changed when we started doing this, Nights of the 21st Century. It's one of those things that causes us to say, you know what, I'm going to need somebody. I'm going to find somebody. So I want you to have a real name here in mind. I want you to have somebody in mind that you're saying, I want this friend. In fact, I'd like you to put 3 names. Try to come up with 3 guys that you want to get close to. Now, for me, I have actually 7, 8 on the upper level. I have my 4 sons and my 4 friends that I mentioned to you. And then I have some really amazing guys that are right there, right around that, and different levels. We'll talk about those levels. But understand, that's sort of, as we define it, how are we going to do it? Now, there's a formula. Now, some of you guys love formulas. Some of you guys hate them. For you that love them, have fun. For you guys that hate them, I thought I'd help you cheat. Look at the formula. It's real simple. A friendship formula is F times MI divided by C equals FO, which is comprised of, now these are going to be all the parts of the formula, but let me just start with the answer, because I would have done a lot better on my SATs if I could have started with the answer. It would have gone a lot better with me. Because my SAT scores probably would have been a lot higher. I guess I had to check my credit score for something I was purchasing, and it was really good, but it made me laugh because it was almost equal to my SAT scores. And so one of the things that when I saw that, and when I think of that, I think, wow, boy, if I only had the answers, just give me the answers, I probably would have done better. I'm going to give you the answer, all right? The FO at the end of the formula stands for this. It stands for friendship order. Don't even worry about writing it down. We'll get there. All I want to do is give you permission to have this. Let's say you have 3 friends. They come to mind that are on your paper. They don't have to be the same rank, the same level of importance. Now, with my sons, it has to be, right? How many times do you, a dad, your kids say, who do you love the most, right? So there's always that kind of thing. But you know what's interesting? I actually have them ranked in what I need from them. It's interesting how they help me, how they encourage me, what their perspectives are, how they guide me, and how they show me things. So I have that. But you know what? They're kind of at an equal level. But what about other friendships? Where are they? I want to give you permission to have guys at different levels. In fact, to be honest with you, you can't have them all on the same level. So we're going to work on that. So take those 3 names and be aware of the fact that they might not all be best man. They might not be all at the top of the list, but they're there and how they work, okay? The friendship formula starts with number 1, a force. That's the F, force. This is what pushes you in the direction of a friendship with someone else. Just so you know, in your DNA, in the very design of who you and I are, is the drive to have a relationship. You just watch children. They gravitate. Matter of fact, babies, untaken care of, untouched, unvalued, don't flourish. They get sick and often even die. You move naturally towards relationship. It's actually so as a guy, it's in your DNA. Now, you go, well, that's in women's DNA. No. It's in human beings' DNA, and it's in your DNA and my DNA. So know that there's a force that will push you towards a friendship. If you keep that in mind, and then you multiply it by this factor. Listen to the next one. Let me tell you a couple of things about what the force would be. Let me give you that, and then I'll tell you the next factor. A force is a specific time in your life. For a specific engagement with who you are and what you are, there'll be times when you need a friend, as I mentioned, through all the different phases. My wedding party would actually change 5 times. If I were to get married now, I've been married 34 years. So it would actually change a considerable amount of time from a variety of people over the time period. I needed friends for certain things. Actually, early on, I probably wasn't as good a friend as I have learned to become today. I would sort of maybe use people a little bit more. They were more advantageous to me. Now, it's been a very mutual giving, growing, learning together kind of thing. But 5 times it would change. Different times, that force is pushing, but it's always pushing. So if I lost a friend, we moved, or they moved, or our kids weren't growing up together, or anything else, then you would move on to another one. But a specific time in life. So you're going to, those lists of guys, specific time. A personal recognition of the need for supportive relationships. You're just simply going to know that I need supportive relationships. Now, remember, your job is to protect the heart of your wife, right? The heart of a woman, you protect that. You protect your children. You protect those around you. So guess what happens with guys? You need supporters with guys. So often I would lean on Lynn to be my supporter, and we're so wired differently. Do you know that if I told any of the 4 guys I mentioned earlier that I was going to go bankrupt, which at different times in my life I thought that was going to happen, if I told any of them, none of them would have panicked. They would go, okay, good, dude, here's what we have to deal with to work on this. None of them would have offered me money. I mean, they're not, they're not stupid friends, but they all would have said to me, hey, here's the problem. Here's the understanding. We can fix this. If I told Lynn we were going to go bankrupt, there's a level of panic that she feels. She would like to be supportive, but she's sitting there, how do I protect my kids? How do I protect the world around us? So there's different ways we approach this. Supportive relationships are going to require you to be involved with guys. So time, support. Look at the next one. A natural response to them. What we're going to have is it's going to be something that you get around them. You just want to be around them. Let's say today you started a brand new job. And within 15 minutes of meeting the job, your immediate supervisor introduced you to 7 people. I will tell you that probably at the end of that 15 minutes, 1 or 2 of them, you went, that would be interesting to build a relationship with. It's just amazing. A natural kind of intuitive response. You used to have that when you were a kid and you go to camp. And who you got to sleep with, and would he be this guy be in the bunk below me, or which guy would be over here? And you get all this concept, and you decide that real quick. The guy, if you didn't go with anybody, you're in all alone. You find that person that you just naturally go, yeah, I want to hang out with that person. Look at the last one. You're going to live life in proximity with one another. One of the things that in order for you to do life, you need to be close to each other. One of our best friends remained our best friends for a lot of years, maybe longer than anybody else in our life. But we moved from where we lived near Philadelphia to Vermont, and they would come up and meet us, and we would come and meet them. But we had kids, and it became harder and harder and harder. And then we moved from there to another location. They always stayed in the same area, but we kind of moved around them. And over a period of time, the proximity of that relationship caused that friendship to fall apart. So you have to put those factors, all right? If you put all that together, that's all combining with the force, moving you towards this. The force times MI. MI is mutual interaction, where both parties ante up at what they are willing to bring to the friendship table in order for it to work. Now this is cool. This is like, what ante up is, right? You're going to play some poker. You'll have to ante up to stay in the game, right? Now, a lot of you say, I want to be best friends with my boss. Well, if my boss doesn't want to be best friends with me, I can play all I want. Let's go ridiculous. Let's say that you want to be best friends with the President of the United States. The possibility of him anteing up to be your best friend is probably going to be pretty rare. Matter of fact, to just be your friend at all is going to be pretty rare. So you have to be realistic. What you want to do is you want to say, who are the people that we mutually want to interact with one another? So now, you're living close near to somebody, you're spending some time with them, there's a responsiveness going on and all that. Now, are they anteing up? Now, let me give you an example that maybe will help this way. Let's say that we have this chasm between normal relationships. All of us start with some kind of distance. Remember the armor? Put the armor on to test how safe things are. There's a distance, right? As we discover that distance, we want to bridge the gap, right? So let's say we're going to build a bridge. They on one side, we're on the other. We're going to build this mutual bridge across. Now, if you're willing to go 80% and they're willing to go 20%, you're fine. You're going to meet. There'll be a bond together. If you're not willing to go 80% and they're only willing to go 20%, guess what's going to happen? You'll not meet. So it has to be mutual interest. Now, not to be necessarily 50-50. There could be somebody that you look at as a mentor and you say, I need that person. So you're going to put more effort in. Or there could be somebody that wants you to mentor them and you're going to put a little less effort. One of the things that's really interesting about mentoring, I can't mentor everyone, you can't mentor everyone, and not everybody wants to mentor us. So what we have to do is we have to see, okay, how far can I go? So it is connection, mutual interaction, and when we do that, that's what makes it work. It has to connect, all right? So let's look at a couple things that will help us see that here on the sheet. Look at the first one. In a mutual interaction, I believe that the bond with others is real, honest, and of value. Now, bond is the key thing, so underline that. That's the part in the bridge where it all locks together. If you can't get there, you can't have a friendship. You have to have a place where you are mutually caring for. I mentioned those 4 guys. You know what? There are days when I've cared for them, maybe not as effectively as they cared for me, but there are days. And in fact, we all shift in roles. They call me up when they're struggling as much as I call them up when I'm struggling. And that bond is very important. And if I choose not to answer their phone call, I got a confession to you here. I have on my cell phone, I have an understanding immediately of who's calling me. There are certain people that I answer and certain people that I don't. Yeah, so if you call me and I don't always answer, I'm sorry. Those guys always get answered. I will tell you, though, that Lynn beats them. The boys beat them. But nobody else beats them. They're at the top of the food chain in my life because you know what? If they need me, I'm there. Bond. Remember, that's very important and how that works. So look at the next one. A willingness to suspend receiving in order to have the pleasure of giving. Now, this is extremely important. If your goal in a friendship is to take, like anything we've talked about, You're sliding into spandex. When you and I are knights, giving is at the source of it. So I need to be honest with you. When those guys rescued me during Caleb's cancer, I didn't build my friendship with them so they would rescue me. We had built that friendship over a period of time through a lot of things that God had done to bring us together. And you know what? I actually felt guilty for some of those days. Didn't have enough strength to fight against it. The sword was down and the chainmail was shredded. I just didn't have much to give. And those guys gave. But for the most part, I enter every relationship, and you need to enter every relationship. And those guys on your list, you got to think in terms of giving, not just taking. Right? Look at the C. The C comes in the formula as you work through it. We're going to divide by the C. This is the choice. The ultimate decision factor that determines the level of importance each friendship has in one's life. See, this is going to be where we have to now choose. To choose the level of importance. Now, you got the bond, right? But I might put a higher stock in this friendship than they do. All right? So how do we understand that? Because if we're going to get to that whole idea of this order that we're going to look at the end, we have to understand there's a few things along the way. There must be a balance of wins and losses between each participant involved. You know, there has to be times when I can protect them, that they can protect me. That's very, very important. Without that, friendship doesn't have much to hold it together, right? We need each other. And there's this kind of balance, wins and losses. So what happens is this. If it's something good for them, and it might not be much fun for me, it's really important. One of my friends just loves to get away, do stuff. I'm really kind of a home guy. I love getting home and just being around the house, being around the guys and all that kind of stuff. So there are times I'll go away with that guy. It's a win for him. It's not a loss for me. It's not terrible. I'll go for him. But then there are times when I'll say, hey, why don't you just come over to the back deck? And he'll come over to the back deck and hang out at our house. And that might be not as much of a win for him, a little bit more for me. That's how it works. Let's see how that goes. That's the choice, to stay in the relationship, build it, and keep it at the right levels. Look at the next one. Practicing love skills. Family members should be among those considered and treated like friends. Remember large care that we talked about last time we were together? You and I need to know that at the top of the food chain has to be your family. For me, it's Lynn, the 4 boys, their girlfriends or wives, and then the mutual, hopefully, the little walkerettes and things that come along the way. What happens is that becomes where we start. Start with family. You know what's interesting? If you have a bunch of guy friends and you don't value your family, you're saying something huge about their worth and their importance. So you got to stop, pull back, and take a hard look at that one. All right? Another one. Consider this under choice. Deepened friendships form when facing a crisis together where intensity and change is necessary. When I talked to you about laying down the sword in my life and those guys coming in, you could tell there was a crisis. You could tell the need. Just even as I describe it, you can almost see the emotion in my eyes. There is this idea of there are times when crises make this bond much stronger. When I say to you that those 4 men can have whatever they want, they can have whatever they want. I will do anything I can for them. Why? Because during the crisis, and I got solidified into them. Now, I don't know if it was the same for them as it is for me, but boy, it's locked it in. You know what's really interesting too? Can I tell you how I feel about my son who had brain cancer? You don't think that just locked in the depth of our relationship as we work through that? And I watched each of my sons rise up and cover him and protect him and fight for him as he fought for himself and protected those around him. By the way, one of the noble things about my son you probably need to know. When he got cancer, he was, we had found it out on, as I said, on April Fool's Day, and we dropped him off at church to tell his girlfriend. He said to me and his mom, hey, Dad, you know what a boy does when he finds out he has a brain tumor? He says, why me, God? Why, God? When a man finds out he has a brain tumor, he goes, God, what do you want me to learn? What do you want me to become? 18 years old. Pretty impressive thing. That's why that friendship there is very, very deep. Character of that man. You know what? Those other 4 guys I mentioned, my other sons, they also have the same kind of character. Those lists of guys you're putting down, let me ask you an interesting question. What words would you use to describe them? What characteristics? What would be the words that you would say describe this guy that I want to have a friendship with. Maybe it's funny. Maybe it's somebody with great wisdom. Maybe it's loyalty. Whatever it is, start thinking, what is it that I long for in the depth of that relationship? Another issue. Once you get all this together, once we have this going, here's what you end up with. You end up with what you call the friendship order. This accepts that you select and measure the level of attachment bond that you will give to each friendship. This means that it's okay, guys, for you to have friendships here, 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 and here. It's interesting that there are guys that are, if these are the four, my son's the four, if they're right there, there's some guys right here that are just amazing in my life. And I'm just so honored to have a relationship with them. But I've given myself permission to say, you know what, I can't always get together with them as much. I can't always do. I must get a request from a guy literally once a week if I would mentor him. And I say no literally once a week to every request. I always check with God, see if he wants it. But you know what? I have to give myself permission to how much I can have within this. And guys, you have to have that freedom as well. That's why I say start with 3 names. Also this, I will also tell you that when somebody asks if I can mentor them, I always ask God every time. I need to check my core. Sometimes I ask the guys what they think. Most of the time they say, hey, dude, watch yourself. You're getting it way out of control. So give yourself permission to have a friendship order, all right? Now, a couple of things I think will help. Roman numeral 3. Forgiveness is needed to dirty the air, test your resolve, and necessitates a confrontation. Forgiveness is needed when somebody does all of that. They just are going to be involved in just making life a little bit tougher. When that takes place, here's a couple of things that I want you to work on. Realizing that forgiveness helps us by freeing us up from the internal consequences of an event. Remember that when you feel like something like this is going on in your life, you need to be able to forgive the person that has hurt you. Friends, it's going to get messy, guys. It always gets messy in the middle between friendships. Be willing to forgive. Next one. Forgiveness is not forgetting. You don't have to forget what the person did to you in order to forgive them. Forgiveness does not involve forgetting. Now, it does for God. God says, when we ask him to forgive us, he removes our sin, our shadow, our wrong as far as the east is from the west, and he remembers it no more. That's amazing. That's a God thing. You and I don't do that. We don't forget. So forgiving does not mean you forget, nor does it mean that you let them do it to you. Look at C. Forgiveness is not restoration. It doesn't necessarily mean that you get back together, because you got to decide. For some of you, you have to forgive what your parents did to you, but you cannot necessarily go back into the relationship because it will pull you right back into the old habits that got you in trouble in the first place. So it doesn't necessarily mean restoration. It does mean, though, that you're letting God deal with that person. It's that freedom. So when it gets messy, when you get hurt by a friend, you got to forgive. It's really important. Doesn't mean you forget. Doesn't mean you get restored. Look at the next one. Self-forgiveness is often necessary in order to forgive others. Some of us have trouble from stuff we've done, forgiving ourselves for what we've done. You have to let that go. You have to be willing to say, here it is. And let God forgive us. You know what? In every relationship that has gotten messed up, I think, and every single one, I think I was responsible at one degree or another. It might have been a small part, it might have been a huge part, but I have to do some forgiving of my own behavior, my own response. Okay, the last one under forgiveness is to forgive others or ourselves fully. I'm going to need God's help. Guys, you're not going to do this alone. Forgiveness is a divine action. It's going to take the vertical connection into our core, so spirit, right? Soul, spirit, connecting into us in order to give you the strength to do that. Now, why do we want to forgive? Because sometimes relationships get messy, but for the most part, we've been talking about something that doesn't always happen. Most of the time, relationships are pretty amazing. Now, when they get messy, there's the way you want to fix them. But the most important thing is, do you want to get involved in having lives that you can touch and touch you when you need them to happen? You know, I remember very distinctly how exhausted I was in the middle of that battle, and I laid down my sword, and it's been a long time since that battle. I'm not as exhausted anymore. Sword is up. I'm ready to fight for them and their needs and where they are. There's a guy in the Bible, it's in your nightly news, called Jonathan. He's a son of a king who fought for David, who would actually take Jonathan's place and be the king instead of him. And he fought valiantly for that guy. He was an amazing friend. You know what? I long to be that friend. I want to be Jonathan to these other 4 guys. They can have whatever they want, right? You're about to break into some campfires where you get to name your friends. That's what I want you to do. When you go to your campfire, I want you to name the guys that you want to be a Jonathan to. I want you to name some guys that you want to invest in and have invest in you. You have to tell them what level they are. Now, I got to warn you, this is going to get tricky because some of the guys that you're going to name are not sitting there in your campfire and they're going to wonder, why not me? You know, it's okay. Give each other permission to not pick each other. And if a guy picks you, don't feel bad that you didn't pick him. It's okay because you're only asking for the top 3. I'm only asking you to start there. Those relationships will build and develop. You're only on week 15. You'll have a chance. But as you give yourself permission, listen to each other's desires. I think one of the most exciting things that makes the loyalty formula work is that men are willing to fight for each other, pick up their swords, take all the parts of your core, including your mind. Remember, it's that ability for you to be a warrior. It's that ability for you to be a king. It's that ability for you to be a lover and your ability to be a friend. When you do it, you're going to find clarity coming from your mind on a level that will change the world. Now go to your campfire, share with boldness those names, and begin the process of solidifying the loyalty formula. Thanks for being with us.